What? Why are you shaking your head?
You're welcome.
Hey guys, what's going on? It's week 18. Welcome to the Underdog Drafter Party. I'm Jake Tribbey, here with my co-host, one of the best football writers around, Ryan Heath. Me and Ryan, we're going to be drafting some Battle Royale teams, talking about our favorite scroll down options, and discussing contest-specific strategy throughout the show. Can also answer any pressing week 18 questions you guys may have. Ryan, how are you doing? It's a whole new year. Is it a new you?
Not a new me. I'm the same as I was 48
yeah.
hours ago, I would
All
say. Right. But yeah, new year, new Battle Royale slate. This is easily the most edge filled Battle Royale slate of the season. I'm still a little shocked at some of the ADPs for some of these players. I'm very excited. Also, it's week 18, so I went ahead and doubled up on the alcohol in here, so we'll see if I make it through the entire show. It might get a little dicey at the end.
All right, well that's what the drafter party's all about. As always, we'll kind of go position by position, breaking down our favorite plays. We'll talk a little bit about contests. Granted, I don't think anything significant has really changed with contests over the last couple weeks. And then we will get into some drafts. I know some of these drafts were filling a little bit slow, so obviously can spend a little bit more time on chat interaction, or I can just ask Ryan whatever silly questions come into my mind, because it's the drafter party. Scott Barrett and the other Fantasy Points owners, they're asleep. Mods are asleep, guys. We can do whatever we want. Ryan, though, we will start out with quarterback here. Top three to me makes a ton of sense this week. Baker Mayfield, Jaden Daniels, Bo Nix, all guys who are extremely motivated to win their respective games. I think the thing that really sucks with Baker is that he's incredibly hard to play with Mike Evans this week. I mean, you need kind of a miracle in your drafts for them to fall to, say, the 6-7 turn, something like that. Where are you at on those three guys? And then where are you at on the rest of the quarterbacks on the board? Because this is, like you said, an edge-filled week where some of these guys say, Jordan Love might not even play the full game. How do you want to attack it?
Yeah, so would echo a lot of what you just said. I would like most of my builds to have a top three quarterback. I think those are kind of clearly the best three guys in terms of hitting a ceiling outcome. As you said, yeah, it's hard with Baker. I may just not take him unless there's I'm at the turn and I can get like an Evans or a Bucky next to him. You can go the route of Jalen McMillan. That's like fine, I guess. I don't know. Baker and Evans is going to be really rare anyway, so maybe not something to actually worry about. With Jaden Daniels, I am mostly playing him with Zach Ertz rather than with Terry McLaurin right now. So McLaurin is always overdrafted in BR, and it's always because people are really thirsty to stack him with Daniels. But you're foregoing at least a few points of projection on like an alternative wide receiver, where if you're drafting McLaurin in the third round. So I think going the Ertz route, at least most of the time, makes a lot of sense there too. With Nix, super easy to just grab Sutton, then Nix around like the 2-3 turn. I will say if you're doing like Bijan, Sutton, Nix as your start, you need to make sure you're doing something very different with your last few picks because it's just super easy to do. I feel like that combo with either Bijan or Bucky, whichever running back in the top 2 or 3 picks, plus Sutton Nix I have seen that on almost every draft board I've done today. So yeah, will be very common. Need to make sure you differentiate. But after that, not a whole lot of interest in Kyler. Justin Herbert, I will be pretty interested in if the Steelers lose, which gives the Chargers incentive to really try to win their game, to improve their seeding and to play against the Texans instead of against the Ravens in the first round. I think you can wait to do that until Saturday night, until we actually know, though, if they're going to have that motivation. I don't think there's any reason to have to make those teams now. But as far as scroll downs, 3 kind of stand out to me. Bryce Young in the best game environment of the slate as an 8-point underdog, it seems pretty good. This team really wants to go out strong, I think. Bryce Young really wants to go out strong. The Falcons have been a sieve in terms of allowing fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. So that works pretty well. After that, Joe Flacco against the Jaguars. I'm interested in any QB against the Jaguars, especially when it's Joe Flacco. We have seen him drop back a million times and score a bunch of fantasy points. Not so much this year, but we know he's got it in him essentially. And he's pretty easy to stack with any of the Colts pass catchers in your last 2 picks. Works really well if you have like BTJ on your team and kind of get frozen out of the top 3 quarterbacks in that way. So he's like kind of a nice way to save a team. And after that, I have some interest in Josh Dobbs as well. He was averaging like 17 fantasy points per game last year on 2 different teams, despite kind of showing up 2 weeks before the season opener with the Cardinals, getting thrown into a game like 2 or 3 days after he got traded to the Vikings, not knowing the playbook at all. And he'd been succeeding. He was averaging the same rushing yards per game as Josh Allen has been this year. So he's got some juice for running the ball as well. Kyle Shanahan was kind of talking about how he likes Dobbs in this spot because of the 49ers offensive line, making it necessary for there to be a lot of scrambling. So that's exactly what we want out of Dobbs. You can stack him. I like stacking him with some of the 49ers options on the main slate. I don't think you have to in BR, but throwing in like a Jawan Jennings as well will also get you very different. But Dobbs at QB9 is already probably different enough that I don't know that you need to go that route.
Yeah, definitely line up with all of that analysis there. I think if you're desperate, you could maybe draft like a share of Tyler Huntley if maybe you got sniped on your quarterback. Obviously he's a bit of a running threat and certainly had a great game for Miami last week. Shout out to the guys in the chat. Yeah, I would say that you can run Bryce Young naked. Obviously would be preferred with Thielen, but things have been spread out enough in Carolina that Bryce Young, just on his own, I'd probably want an Atlanta run back, like ideally Bijan. Certainly viable there. Speaking of Bijan Robinson, he is our overall RB1 on the slate. I really see no reason to get away from Bijan, assuming I draw the 101 here. Beyond that, Bucky Irving, Jonathan Taylor look like pretty great plays to me. And then things get a little dicey. Devon Achan's usage was a little bit weird. Josh Jacobs not expected to get a full workload. I did actually auto draft a share of Josh Jacobs last night. Unfortunately, you guys can see my 10% exposure so far through 10 drafts, courtesy of the great tools over at bestballoverlay.com. You guys will see when we hop into drafts, but really, really useful for seeing, game totals, spreads, the weather, your exposure, and your combinatorial ownership, which you will see right when we get into drafts here. Again, bestballoverlay.com if you want that sort of stuff on your screen while you're drafting these underdog teams. I find it to be a huge help personally, even if I wasn't doing this show at all. It's something I would use. And you can save $10 a month with promo code PARTY. Again, that's promo code PARTY to save $10 a month on the great tools over at bestballoverlay.com. So definitely check that out. Poor Jeff Becker in the chat drafted a bunch of Richardson early in the week. Now has to decide between prioritizing Flacco or Dobbs in his swap ranks. If you were aggressive on AR stacks, I'd probably prioritize Flacco. If you were mostly drafting solo, I think I'd prefer Dobbs just by a hair. Do you have a lean on that, Ryan, before we talk a little bit more running back?
Yeah, that's exactly what I would say. Dobbs is going to project a bit better for us. So yeah, if you weren't stacking him, I'd go with Dobbs.
Yeah. But back to running back here, I think, like I said, top 3, pretty set in stone. I feel very confident with all those guys. Then, like I said, it gets murky. Josh Jacobs' workload, a little bit iffy. Zach Charbonnet I'm fine with, but Kenny McIntosh is working in a little bit more. I definitely like Dobbins here, but I am a little bit worried that he just doesn't get the full game if Pittsburgh ends up winning here, right? Because Los Angeles would have nothing to play for in that scenario. Ryan, what do you think about these top guys? And then, talk about scroll down options. We have a lot of, relatively exciting scroll down options at the running back position this week.
Yeah, so when I was saying that the ADP is incredibly inefficient, for some reason the running back position is where that's the most true this week. As you said, that top 3 is very solid, very locked in. That's not much more to say on that. But after that, our number 4 projected running back is Zach Charbonnet. I'm fine taking some of him. After that, our number 5 and our number 6 projected running backs are actually Michael Carter and Will Shipley. So obviously those are more fragile projections than in a typical week, right? These are third string running backs. In the Eagles case, they're playing all backups this week. In Arizona's case, they're assumedly mostly playing their starters into a pretty strong matchup. San Francisco, second biggest run funnel. I believe top 5 in schedule adjusted RB fantasy points allowed the last 5 weeks. So Carter, I definitely have a lean toward, but with Carter and Shipley both sitting there at below a 34 ADP, not likely to be all that popular, at least so far. If things don't drastically shift in the next 24 hours, I kind of want one of the two of them on most of my teams is how I've been playing it. It doesn't help that most of the running backs kind of after the top 3 aren't all that exciting to me either. But I'm just taking that ownership discount on a Carter, on a Shipley. Maybe I'll mix in some Ray Davis in kind of a similar vein. And just saying, okay, like if I draft a bunch of BR teams and one of those guys hits with most of the field not having any of them, that gets me really far ahead most of the time, I think. It's
right
kind of
there
the opposite of the main slate where I'm like, oh, these fragile projections are going to be 30+% owned, but in BR, this is where I want to get my exposure to those guys.
That was exactly what I was going to say. In DFS, Michael Carter, Will Shipley, a little tougher to handle those guys when they are going to be 30-40% ownership. I think in single entry stuff, you might see Michael Carter push for 50-55% in DFS because he's so cheap. Here, though, I mean, he's free in drafts, and it doesn't really seem like anyone's going to play him. Wouldn't be surprised to see both of those guys come up ranks pretty dramatically or come up in terms of ADP pretty dramatically over the next 24 hours or so, but certainly encouraging that they're both holding around a 34-35 ADP at this point in the week. Blake Corum, I think, is an okay pick, probably going slightly overdrafted at RB8. Rico Dowdle, I want nothing to do with now that we know Trey Lance is going to start for Dallas. I mean, man, I was really excited to play my boy Kevontae Turpin in DFS, but nope. Cowboys are completely dead now that Trey Lance is starting. I think maybe, Ryan, you could argue in like a 10-man draft. We didn't mention this during the quarterback section, but if, quarterback was just a barren wasteland, you could maybe justify like a naked Lance share. If you were really desperate, he does run. So, there's that. He certainly doesn't throw.
I don't know if I'm doing that.
Yeah. I mean, it's tough when they traded a third, fourth round pick for him, and they've had plenty of opportunity to get him on the field, and they've just declined at, every point until this week here. Beyond that, though, I think we've covered running back pretty good. Isaac Guerrero is another guy I wanted to throw out as a pretty strong scroll down. I think I like him a bit more in DFS where he represents great game leverage, but even so in BR, I mean, he should get every high value backfield touch here. Maybe Dobbs rushing takes a little bit away from him, but still a solid play. He is currently our RB8 by Underdog projections. Did you have anyone else you wanted to throw out, Ryan, as like a scroll down before we move on here? Oh, Ray Davis, I think, is a guy that we both sort of like here. Bill's backfield is a bit ambiguous right now. Obviously, we expect James Cook to fully rest, and then sort of a split between Ray Davis, Ty Johnson. You might see Frank Gore Jr. work in a little bit as well. And I think that would be the main risk to Ray Davis, is that they actually say, oh, we love our committee backs. Why not give practice squad player Frank Gore Jr. a ton of work here? Even so, my lean is that Ray Davis ends up sort of dominating this backfield. Our projection on him isn't particularly strong, but he's been a good player this year. And I do think there's some upside. Our RB16 right now in Underdog projection. Anything else you want to add on running back, Ryan?
Yeah, no, I'm with you on Davis. I mean, I like him more on the main slate where he's a bigger ownership discount compared to the other chalky guys. Because I mean, there's a decent chance that even Ty Johnson is involved to a point where Davis isn't going to hit a ceiling. But yeah, you would think they favor him in the red zone. That's what they did last time Cook was out. He's kind of the one that has received some red zone carries even over the last 8 weeks when it hasn't been James Cook. So that, I like him quite a bit. Good matchup against the Patriots team that has completely given up. So yeah, he's definitely in play.
Yeah. Another thing I wanted to point out before we, move on to talk about wide receiver here is that I think this is one of the best weeks for, just getting down volume of the entire season. Uh, my guess is, in the main BR and the Wildcat and some of these larger field tournaments, maybe 20% of teams will just be completely dead because they're drafting guys who are legitimately going to zero, which is absolutely insane. That pays for the rate, guys. Then you're only competing with 80% of teams, 85% of teams, and that puts you in a really good spot. Let's talk about wide receiver, Ryan. I think ADP kind of has it right, at least with these top options. Mike Evans, obviously, tons of incentives. Baker Mayfield, the coaches have all talked about getting him to this 1,000-yard marker. He needs 85 yards, 5 catches, and I believe 2 touchdowns to hit like 2 or 3 million worth of incentives. Brian Thomas Jr., I mean, beast mode is probably the only way to describe this guy. He has just been outrageously good, and now he gets a Colts secondary that got shredded for 40 points by Malik Neighbors, who's in his own right, a pretty strong pick at wide receiver 3 against the Philadelphia Eagles, who are expected to play their backups this week. Ryan, do you have any sort of analysis to add on those top guys? And then where are you looking to scroll down at wide receiver? Because much like running back, fantastic week for scroll down options at wide receiver.
Yeah, kind of my biggest note on the wide receiver position is, I guess, a little surprisingly, because this hasn't typically been the case in recent weeks. There is like a pocket of guys kind of in the middle rounds of ADP that I quite like. So Jackson Smith-Njigba, Adam Thielen, Ladd McConkey, that whole group feels very strong to me. Devontae Adams also projects very well. I'm kind of off the Jets just on literally just negative vibes with how Adams and Rodgers have been talking about this possibly being his last game. And it'd be really cool if I threw for a 500th touchdown. It's just not really the killer instinct that I want out of my NFL players when I need them to score me fantasy points. But yeah, aside from that, Ladd, if the Chargers are properly motivated, they did just absolutely run up the score on the Patriots last week with like a plus 7% PRO. We've seen Ladd kind of go off for over 19 DraftKings points in 3 of his last 6 games. He's one of the most efficient rookie wide receivers of the past 5 years in basically every category. So I really like Ladd here. It's a slot funnel Raiders defense. It's a pass funnel Raiders defense. Really good spot in theory. Again, probably waiting until Saturday, until the result of the Steelers game to lock in, make sure that we think the Chargers will be going all out before I draft a ton of shares of him. But yeah, hopefully when the cards flip over, he's going to be one of my bigger stands in terms of ownership. JSN kind of similar, where the Seahawks should be incentivized to win, or at least Geno Smith should be. He has some pretty big contract incentives. We haven't gotten any indication that the Seahawks aren't going to play all their starters. We've gotten every indication that the Rams are not going to be playing their starters. So could be JSN against backups. He's just been great the last several weeks, so hard to argue too much there. And then Adam Thielen, kind of the same thing. Where the Falcons just allow a ton of fantasy points to opposing receivers. 8-point spread, easy to stack with Bryce Young. Easy way to play Bijan in a way that's not going to be super chalky. And like instead of doing Bo Nix and Cortland Sutton with Bijan, how it lines up with ADP, just doing Bryce Young, Adam Thielen with Bijan gives you some game correlation in the best game environment of the slate. And it won't be popular. So yeah, really like those 3. As far as scroll downs, I'm interested to hear what you have to say. I like some of the stack related scroll downs, like a Michael Pittman on a Flacco team or a Jawan Jennings on a Dobbs team. But I think from a standalone point of view, no one's has super stood out to me. But yeah, interested to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, I mean, I do like Jawan Jennings as a bit of a standalone option. Not a guy that I've drafted yet, but certainly a guy that I'm pretty excited about in DFS and just in general on this slate. I mean, we've seen him absolutely crush in the games where I believe either Kittle or Debo has missed. No Debo this week. Kittle is sort of beat up as he always is. I do like both of these Colts wide receivers, and honestly, I think you could throw in Alec Pierce too as decent one-off options if you're just, you need a second wide receiver in the 6th round. Joe Flacco has, notably increased the Colts pass rate, and this is just the nuts matchup against a Jacksonville defense that has been a complete disaster all year. Jacoby Myers is solid. He projects well. I do question the upside a bit here. I think the case for Myers really only strengthens if the Chargers end up resting here. So that's something to keep in mind with him, where he's probably closer to an okay play for me, and a guy that I'm fine taking if we know the Chargers are full go. But if they end up resting and, he's matched up against some second stringers here, that does make him a bit more tempting. Same thing with a guy like Brock Bowers, who we will talk about shortly here. Calvin Ridley, I think, is, maybe okay. The volume just really hasn't been there as of late, but with Will Levis starting, he should be a little bit more aggressive throwing downfield. And then after that, things get a little bit gross. I don't think you can really convince me to take any of these Bears wide receivers, at least in 6-man drafts. And then you have guys like, Jaden Reed, Romeo Doubs. We're just not sure these Packers players are going to play the full game. Beyond that, you'd be getting into guys who are, we're confident are going to play the full game, but are backups and not particularly good. The Justin Rosses of the world, who I know Scott Barrett would be very upset to hear me say isn't very good, but who knows? Maybe he will end up being very good this week, catching passes from Carson Wentz. Let's talk about tight end real quick, Ryan. Tight end to me feels pretty straightforward. I have a little bit of aversion to taking Kittle, but other than that, I'm pretty okay with all of these top 5 options, as you guys can see by my exposure. I think Brock Bowers and Trey McBride are really fantastic plays here. Bowers especially, he's in a race right now with Malik Nabers to set the all-time rookie receptions record. Bowers currently owns it. He's about 4 receptions ahead of Nabers, who is 2 receptions behind Puka Nacua for the wide receiver receptions record. I'm not sure how much that'll factor in, but it could lead to a little bit more volume for either Nabers or Bowers. Granted, those guys are already seeing fantastic volume here. Ryan, what are your thoughts on the tight end position? Any interest in scrolling down here? Because to me, I think the scroll downs at running back and wide receiver are so strong that I kind of just want one of these top 5 or so options. Then I can figure out a way to get unique at a different position.
Yeah, I don't want to scroll down. I want a top 5 option. If I'm stuck with Kyle Pitts as the top option, I'm never clicking Kyle Pitts' name when he's the tight end 6. And there's all these other options where I'm literally just...
Hear me out on Pitts. What if Underdog changed their scoring settings overnight? They said, if you throw an interception as a receiver, you bobble the ball, you throw it to a defensive player, 50 points. Would that change your mind?
That would send him to the top. Yeah, then I'd be taking him over Bowers.
There you go. All right, there you have it.
But yeah, I'm just not clicking Kyle Pitts' name when the alternatives are guys that are way lower owned, and we're just kind of hoping for touchdowns from all of them. So yeah, give me even Tucker Kraft, who might not play the whole game, over Pitts if I'm getting an ownership discount there. Yeah, I mean, not that there's any amazingly strong options. Chigo Okonkwo, a late DNP on Friday, which really sucks. He would have been a great option. I'm a little bit scared now, especially with Will Levis likely starting. Just a lot of things kind of pulling down my Chigo Okonkwo optimism. But I guess scrolling back up, my 2 points on the tight end position I wanted to make sure I made was Bowers and McBride, I think, are among the 2 best clicks on the slate right now. And the reason for that is there's a massive projection gap between those 2 and everyone else at the tight end position. But they're going in between Malik Nabers and Cortland Sutton. They are projected about the same as those 2 players. And the scarcity is just so much bigger at the tight end position there. There's such a larger teardrop where sure, if you are locked into, I want to do a Bo Nix stack, then yeah, you can click Sutton over them. But yeah, I would just rather click Bowers and McBride almost every time over a Nabers or a Sutton as standalone options. So that's going to be something I'm forcing myself to do. Zach Ertz, I already mentioned him, but he's good on Jaden Daniels teams. He's pretty good as a value in general, I would say. But yeah, that's the tight end position. Not super complicated, as you said.
Yeah. Obviously Chig dealing with some injury concerns. He may not go. If Chig didn't go, Ertz would be our tight end 4 by projection. NUR in chat said he's afraid Ertz may be rested for the playoffs. I really don't think that's much of a risk this week. Washington has to go all out. for seeding purposes. So would be very, very surprised if Ertz ended up resting. He's a guy I feel very comfortable taking against a Dallas team that is just, I mean, they're starting Trey Lance. So that tells you all you need to know about the Cowboys right now. All right, Ryan, we can hop into some drafts here. Again, when it comes to contests, not too much has changed relative to recent weeks. Battle Royale, I think they shrunk the size slightly. So 30K to first is a bit more than, sort of the 10% threshold I like to see. Goal line stand, I think, is going to be really great. I seriously doubt we'll be able to get in one tonight that'll fill. I mean, drafts have been filling for me pretty slow today for what things are worth, but we can still try for a goal line stand. I do think this is a great week for like 10 or 12 person drafts. So I might add a little extra analysis in our Discord, which, by the way, guys, Fantasy Points Discord, free to join. A lot of the best channels, say like the NFL DFS channel, are paywalled, but there are a handful of channels that are free, including our Underdog Battle Royale channel, where me and Ryan Heath will drop free rankings every single week that you can use as a great way to identify quick values. I think those will really come in handy this week. After the show, me and Ryan will spend a little bit of time talking about those rankings, get them in a great place for you guys. And then beyond that, I think we kind of have the standard contests. Fullback dive, I think they actually released earlier in the week like a smaller version of the fullback dive that filled really early, which is encouraging. So back to 5K to first for the fullback dive. And then we just have our standard community leagues. Deposit Kingdom Double Doink is more of like a cash game contest this week because, of course, Pete Overset is the cash game king of week 18.
Did they change the structure of that?
Yeah, they did. They made it a double up instead of a tournament, which is perfect, for Pete's week 18 bit. Yeah, that's one of the best bits in fantasy without a doubt. We'll just hop into a wildcat here. Hopefully we can get this to fill pretty quick, or maybe I'll try a battle royale. Ryan, my question for you, and by the way, guys, chat, if you guys have any questions about week 18, feel free to ask them here. But Ryan, my question for you is, you just kind of wrapped up your first season as a full-time fantasy writer. As you sort of reflect on the season, what went right, what went wrong? What are your thoughts there? Like, what were the successes? What were some of the things you'd kind of like to improve on going into 26 or 25? Because it is currently 2025. Geez, I mean, I was fast forwarding a full year for you.
Yeah. You're putting me on the spot a little bit here, Jake.
Yeah, man. I mean, this is what happens when drafts fill up slow and chat's not asking questions. I'm going to put Ryan on the spot.
I think this isn't even like really related to process or content or whatever, but I think my biggest thing, and I've realized this week, like as things have slowed down a little bit, that I need to be way more regimented in my time, like during the season, because there were weeks where I just like I would not eat food until like late in the day, or I would not like get up from my desk. And it's not because like, oh my God, I'm being overworked as in my job as a fantasy football analyst. It's because I don't have like the self-control to be like, okay, I can stand up from my desk and leave this article or whatever this is for 30 minutes and it'll be here when I get back. It'll still be fine. So that's like, I guess something I need to improve just from a workflow perspective. Because it was very obvious to me this week, especially where I wasn't like as insanely busy and up against deadlines, where I was like, oh, I like feel so much better like as a human being right now. Like I'm actually taking care of myself more than I have been for the last few months. But yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, that's a big one for me too. I mean, I think I've noticed like pretty big correlation between how I feel just while I work and like how well I'm taking care of myself. So I think that's certainly reasonable. I think the biggest one for me in terms of like overall improvement was just being like way more at peace with the variance of all these insane games. Like, if you're getting down an amount of money that matters to you, like there are obviously going to be frustrations and, all kinds of disappointments and stuff with the way an individual week goes. But I don't know. I think part of it is because I just played like an obscene amount of volume during UFL that now during NFL, like even if I have like a grand down, I'm not like sweating it as much as maybe I should be. Because UFL, I'm just playing like obscene volume. But yeah, I think just like being a little bit more at peace with the results and focusing, like being way more process focused than results focused when it comes to like your tilt. I think is probably my biggest like overall area of improvement for this past season compared to previous seasons. But Ryan, we drew the 103 here. This is kind of a tricky spot. I generally prefer drafting either like the 101 or closer to the 106 so far in the drafts that I've done. This week, we could take Mike Evans, hope Baker falls to us. That's not necessarily great. Still have Jonathan Taylor and Bucky Irving both on the board. I feel pretty comfortable with both players since Evans is gone.
Yeah, I'm taking JT just because Bucky you can get later in the round across my drafts. But yeah, we slightly prefer Bucky by projection, but I think it's close enough that I'll just even out my exposures probably. I will say I don't love clicking Evans in round one because, yeah, as you said, you're almost never getting Baker back. You can stack up the other side of the game like that. That's fine, but only I think going with a running back gives you more flexibility. Like you can then go on to kind of stack up any game at that point.
Yeah, certainly think that's fair. Next pick here, I think, is going to be a little tricky. I'm largely looking at tight end, either Bowers or McBride when I land on this spot. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah. Oh, that's annoying that Baker actually did make it back. But yeah, I think McBride's probably the way to go here.
Yeah, I don't really see anything else that I love. I'll sort by ADP.
Yeah, you hope that like BTJ falls to you if you took.
Oh yeah,
Taylor.
For sure.
That's like the nuts, but yeah.
Yeah, getting like that sort of mini stack is fantastic, and then like maybe in a miracle type draft, you could even get a little bit of Bo Nix or Sutton exposure and something like that. All right, so far Jonathan Taylor, Trey McBride. What direction do we want to go with our stack? Obviously, we're not going to land any of these top quarterback options. Sort of left with the scraps here. What do you want?
This would be a good. We have McBride. This would be a good like Josh Dobbs team.
It would be. So, do we want to go best available wide receiver, which would be Sutton, or best available running back, which would probably be either Achane or Dobbins? Actually, Charbonnet by our projections, always off the board.
I think we go wide receiver.
Yeah.
Just because the running back value is better later.
Yeah, so much depth at running back this week. Certainly think that's a sharp call. I will queue up Dobbs. I will queue up Juwan Jennings. I also think Ricky Pearsall is a viable pairing with Josh Dobbs on these teams. Ricky Pearsall obviously, went off last week, and it really seems like they're trying to get him heavily involved in terms of the overall scheme. I forget the exact number, but his first read target share was really, really strong last week. And, with no Debo, I think they're trying to figure out like what exactly will we have in our 11 personnel set next year. That's probably going to be Juwan Jennings, Brandon Ayuk, and Ricky Pearsall. So why not feed those guys with Joshua Dobbs, who, Ryan, I don't know if you knew this, but Joshua Dobbs, rocket scientist. So he might be able to really figure out how to get those guys the ball this week.
I also learned about 10 minutes before the show that he played college ball with Juwan Jennings. So,
well, there you go.
Hilo mentioning that in Cash Core this week. So,
wow. Okay. Now that's powerful. That's the analysis we really need here. I guess like the only thing I'm wondering at this point, since we have sort of our general outline for this draft set, what sort of order should we go in with these picks? Again, I was taking a lot of Dobbins when I was drafting last night. The more that I thought about it, the more I thought, man, maybe I should probably wait to, go way overboard on Dobbins until we know the result of this Bengals Steelers game. So don't necessarily want to take Dobbins because I already have a decent bit. What direction do we want to go running back? What order do we want to take these guys? Michael Carter would be probably our best projected value overall, and he is being drafted the highest. So do we want to go Carter in the fourth?
Do we want Carter plus McBride? Like I think it's fine if the game goes off, but no.
Yeah, we do get really strong game correlation there. Probably something I prefer a little bit more in smaller fields, and this is a wildcat entry, so we could prioritize a guy like Shipley instead. I don't think I have any Shipley exposure. Could also go Ray Davis potentially. I
think Shipley makes sense for this team.
Well, we can definitely afford to wait on Shipley. He's not getting drafted basically at all here. So let's go Juwan Jennings. Can round it out with a Joshua Dobbs and a Will Shipley. And the nice thing is, with these like scroll down running backs this week, if we got sniped on Shipley, it's pretty easy to find a replacement pick. So this team should end up as Joshua Dobbs, Will Shipley, Jonathan Taylor, Cortland Sutton, Juwan Jennings, Trey McBride. Man, I mean, to me, that's a pretty solid Week 18 team. Obviously, you know, the projections with Shipley are pretty fragile, but we have him for 14.7 underdog points. That's RB, what is that, 6? RB 7? Yeah, RB 6 on this slate by underdog projection. Really, really strong projection for a guy who is going largely undrafted. I'd imagine even if he did jump up draft boards a decent bit, probably doesn't get higher than what, 33, 32 ADP by the time things lock Sunday morning. So yeah, Will Shipley certainly looks like a solid play this week. And again, you know, in DFS, I'm a little bit hesitant on a guy like Shipley. So that's part of the reason I think I'm going to go pretty hard on underdog drafts this week, get myself some Shipley and some Carter exposure in sort of the best way possible in a format where people just really aren't playing it. All right. Yeah, I guess we're sort of just waiting for Shipley to come back around to us.
Yep. This is like, I will say this week for weekly battle royale specifically, not just like you can tell in the ADPs that there's big edges here. I think also a big part of it is a lot of the volume drafters are grinding the like overall playoff best ball contests right now.
That's a great point.
Which are super fun. Super fun. Definitely super big edges there. Very tilting when people snipe you and like draft dead teams, but make it so that you have a worse team. Yeah, if you thought that getting your quarterback sniped in seasonal BR was tilting. Yeah, so recommend trying out playoff best ball. Yeah, that's a whole new level of tilt. I guess I should plug.
Yes,
I will. Yes, let me while you look for another contest. Jacob Sanderson and I will be live right here on the Fantasy Points YouTube channel next Monday this coming Monday at 9 p.m. Eastern. Going through playoff best ball drafts. Jacob writes a ton of content about them. They're like his favorite thing to do this time of year. He's super obsessed. He dropped like a 12,000 word article or something on them this morning that I have read in its entirety. It's great stuff. Can't wait to get him on here, pick his brain, go through some playoff best ball drafts. And yeah, it's kind of a hard format to like get into without having done some research beforehand and really understanding what the goal is. It's very different than regular best ball, like the stacking logic and everything. It just is so dependent on the team, like which teams you're stacking up and who you think is going to advance in the playoffs, who can actually make the Super Bowl and give you a full lineup. So just like very different things to be thinking about compared to most formats. But our goal is going to be, if you tune into that stream, you should be able to draft plus EV playoff best ball teams. So yeah, again, Monday at 9 Eastern time. And we'll also be ripping another one Thursday of next week as well.
Yeah, I am personally very excited for those streams. I haven't drafted any playoff best ball teams, so I am really excited. I know initially I was sort of invited to come on those streams and largely declined, in part because I had a commitment next Thursday, but also in part because I don't really know what's going on, and I really want someone smarter than me, like Ryan Heath and Jacob Sanderson, to tell me what the hell to do in these playoff best ball drafts, because I have heard a ton of, most of the guys I follow on Twitter, if they're not analysts writing for a site, they're professional DFS players. And basically all of these guys, these high-end gamblers, are like, oh yeah, the edges in playoff best ball are just extreme. I've heard especially good things about drafting specifically on DraftKings, where the draft rooms are a lot softer. I know a lot of people have had that experience in regular best ball. That's where I get most of my volume down. So really excited to hear you and Jacob sort of chop it up and yeah, explain to me what the best sort of process is with these playoff best ball rosters. And I do think that's a great note for this week, as we talk about, getting maybe a little bit of extra action down on this week 18 slate, where, yeah, I mean, if all the best drafters are focused on playoff best ball, then I really want to grind battle royale, which should be softer. Maybe these battle royale contests don't fill quite as much as we've seen in the past. It'll kind of, I'll obviously be keeping track of, what overlays or what's on pace to overlay and what isn't. But yeah, certainly a good note as we head into this week. Ryan, we drew the 102 here. Any sort of plan you want to come into this draft with?
I mean, normally I'm just clicking whoever is there of Bijan or Taylor. Watching Baker Mayfield fall to the 205 in our last draft kind of makes me want to gamble on Mike Evans, but we probably shouldn't. We should probably not draft a dead team on stream. So yeah,
I mean, a team with Evans and no Baker wouldn't be a dead team, but we would be reaching a bit for Evans, and I don't know. I mean, I think Hilo pointed this out well on caching points. Like, I think there's a very high percentage chance. Oh, we get Bijan. Mike Evans.
Oh, yeah. It makes it easy.
Oh, all right, boys. We are off to a great start here. But what I was going to say was that, Hilo pointed this out on stream, which I thought was a great point. I think we all accept there's a really great chance Mike Evans hits 5 catches, 85 receiving yards, multiple touchdowns, so that he gets his incentives, so that he ties Jerry Rice for the all-time record of consecutive 1,000-yard receiving seasons. But the Bucs are playing to win this game. And maybe, if New Orleans is triple covering Mike Evans on every play, which obviously isn't going to happen, but just bear with me, they will have to go somewhere else with the ball. So there is a world where, even though I think Mike Evans is a great pick, and even though I think he's, 80% to hit like 15 underdog points, there's certainly a world where he just doesn't quite get you there. And I definitely don't think I want to reach for him over, especially a guy like Bijan, but even guys like Bucky Irving and Jonathan Taylor, who are just in overall better spots, probably have safer floors, even with, all the incentive narrative around Mike Evans.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I also just realized that earlier I made a comment about stacking the other side of Mike Evans' game. I was thinking they were playing the Panthers in that moment. I think my head is still in week 17. Yeah, probably don't stack the Spencer Rattler Saints against Mike Evans in VR.
I think if you really want some Saints exposure, Juwan Johnson is probably the way to do it. If you're a true spring football enjoyer like me and you love pain, you could always draft Kevin Austin, but that's not going to get you anywhere in life. All right, Ryan, we are coming up on our second pick here. We already have Bijan Robinson. I kind of like Bryce Young. Do we want to make this like a Bryce Young team on the back half? And then just take best available, which I think pretty clearly would be either Sutton or Adams at this point. Let me sort by ADP here. I don't want anything to do with Jacobs. Could also take McBride.
I think you take McBride if you want to do a Bryce Young team. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. All right. Let's do McBride. We'll come back around to us shortly. Drake London, I don't know if Atlanta has quite enough juice for me to want to take London here. Things have really kind of thinned out a bit. We could go Charbonnet and then figure out wide receiver later. What do you think about that?
I think that makes sense.
Yeah, I think given the way the board looks, that is probably our best bet here. All right, 8 picks away. As always, guys, if you have any questions about the Week 18 slate, I know for most of us, our fantasy season is wrapped up, so we're mostly either focused on DFS, playoff best ball, battle royale. But I know a handful of leagues out there that have a Week 18 championship game. Ryan, do you have any takes on Week 18 championships other than that they're horrendous and I don't understand why people do them?
Yeah, I mean that's pretty much it. I don't know. It would be. I was gonna give a take of like, yeah, Week 18 is like a totally different game in itself. It's really fun. Like this could be a thing, and then I realized I'm reinventing DFS. That's just play Week 18 DFS, guys.
Yeah, that is. I mean, I guess like you could argue, oh, we're gonna push ourselves to really figure out who's gonna get the Week 18 usage, but then you're also looking at, benching a lot of your stars for guys like Justin Ross or Nico Remigio, who, even people watching this stream who are pretty in tune with the NFL may not know. Well, you definitely know who Justin Ross is if you like fantasy points, but you probably have no idea who Nico Remigio is. I certainly didn't early on in the week here. Ryan, we do need best available wide receiver. I kind of think we go Devontae Adams to Adam Thielen here. Obviously, should take Thielen first if we want to complete the Bryce Young stack. At a certain point, though, I mean, Drake London falls enough that we probably should consider taking him. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I kind of like the fairly unique Drake London team. Like we're going
Thielen.
Oh, that's terrible.
That is not good.
Almost makes me want to take London more if
we could go London
we can
pivot, and then just hope Atlanta goes crazy.
Which I actually
don't hate.
I actually like that. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, and that's probably the only team that I will draft like this week. Atlanta does have a massive implied total. This is the best game environment of the slate. 48 implied team total overall. And, Penix hasn't played great from a fantasy perspective, but I think, some of the film guys have certainly said that he's been decent overall. All right, we need one more receiver before we draft Penix here. What direction do you want to go? I don't have any Juwan exposure.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have to scroll down if we're Penix is the thing. This will already be a unique team.
Yeah, there's just like no one at the top that I really love, like Marvin Mims, Tyreek Hill, Metcalf. Not great.
Nico Collins not going to play, but being drafted over all these guys.
I cannot believe Nico Collins is being drafted by anyone.
Let's stick with Jennings then. Yeah, I'm cool with that.
Yeah,
he's averaging 20 expected fantasy points in the 2 games that either Kittle or Debo missed. So
he scored 45 DraftKings points in one of those games. Like, I mean, he's a really strong pick this week. And again, I think you can make a very similar argument for a guy like Ricky Pearsall. If you're drafting a handful of Dobbs lineups, say you're drafting 5 Dobbs lineups, I probably want, I don't know, Jennings on 3 of them, Pearsall on 2 of them, something like that feels like a pretty good split to me. And again, guys, the great tools over at bestballoverlay.com can help you keep track of sort of what your combinatorial exposures are. You see, if I click on both Drake London and Juwan Jennings, you'll see I haven't taken them on any teams at all so far this season. So yeah, certainly helps you sort of keep track of your portfolio and understand, like, if you're drafting a ton of teams, say you're drafting 20, 30, 40 teams or more, you don't want to end up taking the same 2 wide receivers on all of your Penix stacks or all of your Bryce Young stacks. You want to diversify a little bit, at the very least, to limit your variance, which is a huge consideration when you're playing these large field tournaments here. Assuming we don't get sniped on Penix, who actually is the QB7 this week. I thought he'd be a little bit lower. But assuming we don't get sniped on Penix, we will end up with a Penix, Bijan, Zach Charbonnet, Drake London, Juwan Jennings, Trey McBride team, which I certainly like quite a bit. Actually, you would almost not even know it's week 18 just by looking at that lineup. You might think it's a regular old week and we're just,
these are all actual NFL players. Yeah,
exactly. I really it would be great if we could get into a 10-man draft on this stream. So I might queue that up after this one, because I'm really interested to see, once you get to, QB 8, 9, 10, like some of those stacks are going to be real goofy on a week 18 like this. We will end up with Penix here, so I'm just going to click off since this guy already has his quarterback taken. That was a solid draft. Let's see if we can get into a $15 goal line stand. These are some of my favorites. I mean, I've said this all year. I think the edges in these goal line stand drafts are absolutely massive because the field just doesn't like to get as deep into stuff here. Ryan, what do you say we wait maybe a couple minutes for this to fill? And then if not, we can just round things out with a regular old BR. But if you guys want to draft with us, goal line stand, $15 entry, 10-person drafts over on Underdog. Should be a really fun one. Plus, you get an incredible advantage. Me and Ryan love to telegraph our picks beforehand, so you can always snipe us, frustrate me on stream. I mean, that's got to be one of the great joys of life here. Ryan, maybe this is too straightforward of a question to ask, but are there any like sort of sneaky game environments that really excite you? For me, it's probably Indianapolis and Jacksonville, but is that really sneaky when it's the second highest total on the slate? I don't know. Do you have any thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the big one. Is Rams Seahawks sneaky? I don't know if I even like it that much, but like Rams backups, Seahawks should be motivated. Maybe the Rams actually drop back a bunch with Jimmy G. That's going to be probably like a game stack only type of game. Yeah. I think wide range of outcomes there on the main slate for me. But yeah, I don't know that there is a sneaky game environment in week 18.
I'll throw one out there that, I mean, it's incredibly gross and like Vegas disagrees. The total's 37.5. So feel free to ignore it. But I honestly think Philadelphia and New York might have a little bit of juice. Obviously, we saw the Giants get into a massive shootout last week. I also think, and I made this point on cashing points, Tanner McKee, of all these like sort of fringe, kind of shitty quarterbacks who are starting this week, Tanner McKee, I think, might have a little bit of juice. He threw for 54 yards, 2 touchdowns on just 4 pass attempts last week. Mike Renner, who is a draft analyst that I have a ton of respect for, also one of my former coworkers at PFF. Fun fact, Mike Renner actually left his PFF Ultimate account logged in on my computer, and I didn't log out, didn't shut the computer down for like 6 months so that I could watch, I think probably Desmond Ridder film when he was playing for UC back in the day. But I always thought that was pretty fun. But Mike Renner called Tanner McKee the most underrated quarterback prospect of the 2023 NFL draft, alongside Tank Dell and Brenton Strange at their respective positions. I do think McKee might have a little bit of juice, and I also think you could argue Kenny Pickett was only starting over this guy because Kenny Pickett was a first-round pick. McKee, I think, was like a fifth-round pick. McKee just might be outright better than Kenny Pickett. And the tough part with McKee, though, is, who do you sort of stack him with? Really, really hard take to apply to BR. I think it's mostly like a DFS. I'm just going to take a chance with him and Johnny Wilson sort of take. But yeah, do you have anything to add on Tanner McKee before I hop out of this and try to join a battle royale?
Yeah, not much on Tanner McKee. I mean, on Kenny Pickett, he will always stick in my mind. Even if he never does anything else in the NFL, he will always stick in my mind as his touchdown rate as a rookie was sub 2%. There are like 5 guys in modern history that actually played as rookies and were that low. I remember like writing the tweet of, okay, guys, like Kenny Pickett, not good. There is no way that he has a sub 2% touchdown rate this year. It was, you know what it was? It was a pro Deontay Johnson argument when he was on the Steelers. Well, is exactly what it was.
As a guy who owns a Deontay Johnson rookie card, I can tell you with certainty that pro Deontay Johnson arguments only cause pain and suffering.
Yeah, and it did cause pain and suffering because Pickett did it again in his second year, had another sub 2% touchdown rate. It might be 3%. I don't remember the exact number, but basically nobody has ever actually started a second season after doing that as a rookie and been worse. Pickett did it. Like in absolutely no other company, just the only guy who was that bad as a rookie got to start again as a sophomore and was that bad again.
Yeah, pretty brutal run out for Pickett, who's been nothing but bad. My biggest Kenny Pickett tilt was back when he was drafted. I had a decent bet on him to be the first quarterback selected in that draft, which he was, and I won the bet. The tilt, though, was that I didn't realize this at the time. BetMGM had a initial deposit offering, and this was sort of the first bet I ever placed on that sports book, where you got a $2,000 free bet, and I was unaware. So I placed like a $300 bet.
Oh my god,
on Kenny Pickett. I should have won like $3,000 on that, and instead
this was the Malik Willis year, right? Where we thought Malik Willis was going to go first, right?
Yeah, same class as Desmond Ridder, if I remember correctly. Yep. I hope I'm not confusing them.
Yeah, where like Malik Willis was being mocked routinely in like the top 5 picks until like the end of March by the entire industry. So I assume the odds you got on Pickett being first would have been pretty good.
They were okay. It was like plus
early in draft season.
I believe it was between him and Willis because that was a disastrous quarterback class. I mean, obviously Desmond Ridder went in the 3rd round, so you really don't need to hear more than that about that class. But yeah, that was certainly one of my more frustrating betting moments. Ryan, unfortunately, we drew the 103 again. Honestly, I'm kind of thinking we mix things up a little bit. BTJ, run it back with Flacco, maybe? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, let's do it. Why not?
Right. Hell yeah.
Yeah. I have seen BTJ fall to the 2nd. I've made a couple Flacco teams that way, but yeah, let's do a Flacco team for stream.
Yeah, we're gonna alpha this. We're gonna be the team that wins taking Brian Thomas Jr. at the 103. I believe this is a standard $7 battle royale, so about 30,000 entries that we are competing with. Generally speaking, though, I would want to wait on a guy like BTJ for the sake of this stream and also getting a little bit more Flacco exposure, who I think is going to be just a tad underowned here in Battle Royale. Definitely like the BTJ angle from the 103.
I do want to point out that we said at the top of the stream that we want all our teams to have top 3 quarterbacks, and we haven't drafted a single top 3 quarterback team yet.
That is a fair point. I mean, that's unfortunately kind of the way these drafts have broken for us. I think the hardest part for me is going to be, especially this week, I think I'm going to really need to keep in mind that I want some Baker exposure, and maybe I only end up with Baker and Jalen McMillan, but hey, I mean, that's okay when, there's a decent chance Baker drops 30 underdog points here.
I will, if we get Jaden, I have to say I'm tempted because BTJ Jaden is going to be a not common pairing.
Okay.
Like you're
That's
up
fair.
against the wall at running back, obviously.
Yeah, that's true.
Right.
And with their
I don't know.
ADP,
If you want to draft a Flacco team, don't let me stop you.
no, I already have some Flacco teams. I kind of like this Jaden Daniels angle. I know we talked about McLaurin as being a pairing with Daniels. We could also go Zacchaeus or Ertz here, which I think is pretty intriguing. So yeah, just took Jaden Daniels, Daniels, Brian Thomas. I do think the one risk with Daniels, especially now that the Cowboys are starting Trey Lance, Washington might just not have to throw it all. Like it might just be all the running backs. Austin Eckler is expected back this week. I'm not sure if they'll activate him. They might save him for the playoffs. I'm not sure if there's been any news there, but that would be the one risk with Jaden Daniels is I have certainly a lot more confidence Cooper Rush could keep up with Washington's offense as opposed to Trey Lance, who I pretty much have no confidence in at this point. But yeah, let's get a little bit of Jaden Daniels exposure. It's a great spot though. I mean, like I said, this Dallas team is largely given up. For our next pick here, I mean, probably best possible would be Sutton. I seriously doubt he makes it back to us. McLaurin is just going to be the default with Daniels. So I do sort of want to pass over him, even though, over the course of say 50 drafts, I'd probably want McLaurin on maybe 60% of my Jaden Daniels team, something like that, 70%, right around there. The one thing I will say on McLaurin is I don't want him on any team that doesn't have Jaden Daniels. I really have a hard time seeing McLaurin getting there and Daniels not being one of the highest scoring quarterbacks of the slate. So I would keep that in mind. With McLaurin, we still have Sutton on the board. To me, he's the pretty clear pick here. We're not going to draft a Dallas run back.
Tight ends are all gone, right? The Bowers. Yeah. Sutton's fine. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, we can go with Sutton. And then we can wait on Ertz, who I will queue up early here, 29 ADP, so we can wait at least a round, I think, on him. And then we're just looking at running back. Corum, Dobbins are okay. We don't have any Garendo exposure yet, so he feels pretty solid to me here. I think, and I highlighted this on Cashing Points, I think especially in DFS, we're 49ers Cardinals is going to be really, really popular. Garendo represents excellent leverage. I know we talked about that with Scott Barrett a little bit earlier today, Ryan. What are your thoughts on who our running back should be here?
Agreed on Garendo. The other should probably be a scroll. I mean, you're looking at I think Carter and Garendo on opposite sides are I okay. Maybe not the best for a ceiling in a large field tournament.
Yeah, I am just a little bit worried about DJ Dallas stealing some routes. I don't think that's a huge concern for Carter, but if we are drafting them on the same team, probably makes a little bit of sense to nitpick there.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean this could be another Will Shipley or Ray Davis team. It could be, that works. This would be like a decent like J.K. Dobbins team, where we're kind of, because we reached on BTJ, we're like fading the top 3 running backs. So maybe, I guess you're playing to an outcome of somebody other than them goes off. Dobbins seems like a likely enough candidate.
Yeah. I really like Dobbins this week. Again, it is like, especially if you're drafting right now, it is just to bet the Bengals will win. And, as a guy who's a bit of a Bengals fan, I'm pretty happy to make that bet, Ryan. It would be, what a beautiful run out if Denver actually lost to Kansas City's backups and the Bengals managed to sneak into the playoffs, because they would be, I think, everybody's favorite, like 20-1 Super Bowl bet. Like that would be really, really awesome. Of course, not a bet I'm looking to make right now because there is a 90% chance they're going to miss the playoffs. But yeah, definitely like the way we've built this team so far. Jaden Daniels, J.K. Dobbins, Brian Thomas Jr., Cortland Sutton, hoping to round it out with Zach Ertz and Garendo. Ertz will be our next pick here if he doesn't go off the board, which he very well might. I guess we can kind of bail ourselves out with Johnny Smith. Certainly don't mind a naked Jaden Daniels. I mean, obviously he can run. Pass game stuff has been pretty spread out overall in Washington, but would prefer him stacked. Ertz has a lot of good incentive markers. I think I had a note on that somewhere around here. 9 receptions to earn $250,000, 90 receiving yards to earn another $250,000, and then 2 touchdowns to earn $250,000. I largely think incentive narratives are overblown, but those are, fairly attainable incentives. The one thing to keep in mind with incentives, because you'll obviously hear, no matter what content you consume this week, you'll hear a ton about incentives. Some teams, and Johnny Proctor and the Fantasy Points Discord channel has done a great job pointing this out. Some teams will just pay the incentives and tell the players to sit if they're close. So there are other poverty organizations, Cincinnati Bengals obviously being the biggest one, who will just say, no, you have to hit your incentives because our owner is worth less than the market capitalization of the team itself. So we can't afford to pay anything we don't absolutely have to there. Ryan, anything to add on the incentive narratives as we wrap up this final draft?
I guess like another kind of layer of that is, but in the NFL, there's two types of incentives in terms of what counts against the salary cap and what they have to put into escrow. So there's likely to be earned incentives, which usually, unless this has changed significantly in the last few years, it's usually just if they would have hit it last year, the incentive in the contract counts against the salary cap for that year. So I think Ertz's would not be, but in some cases, if they're likely to be earned incentives, yeah, I think that's a lot of the time when the team is like, yeah, we're just going to pay it. We've had to plan like we're paying it this year anyway. If they don't hit it, they can offset on the cap next year. I don't have any. I didn't come prepared enough to give you an example of a team that could benefit from doing that this year, Jake. But yeah, it's I guess long story short, yeah, it's not as simple as like this guy has an incentive, therefore we know that the team is going to try to get it for him, right?
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of different wrinkles and outs to that where the player's not necessarily going to be super pissed if he doesn't get it.
Yeah, there are. And I mean, certainly an important thing to keep in mind this week where a lot of content will sort of revolve around incentive motivations, where that's not, it's not always as black and white as some people may make it seem. Ryan, before we get out of here, why don't you tell the people about where they can find your stuff, what kind of stuff you plan on working on as we head into the playoffs here?
Yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, we've got the 2 playoff best ball streams right here next week, Monday night, Thursday night, 9 p.m. Eastern time. Me and Jacob Sanderson should be an awesome time. So make sure you tune into that. Other than that, Jake, we have the playoff slates coming up, slate breakdown. I know you and I will be working on together. And I think we're doing at least one more Battle Royale show for the playoffs. Is that right?
Yeah. I think we will be bringing the drafter party back at least for the wild card round. We may be we'll consider doing it for the divisional round. You guys can certainly let us know if you want to see it for the divisional round. I think for the wild card slate we'll have like ADP listed, but for the divisional round, I would imagine with just 8 teams playing, there'll probably be 4-person drafts. ADP won't be listed, so the edges will be significantly bigger. Something me and Ryan will talk about behind the scenes. But if you guys want to peer pressure us into a divisional round show, you certainly can. But yeah, keep an eye out for the wildcard round edition of the Underdog Drafter Party. I'll try to get a guest. I've been trying to get Neil Orfield on all year. Every week I ask him, and every week he says, Jake, you're talking about a Friday at 8:30 p.m. I have plans. I have a social life. I have a wife. I have friends. And I'm like, come on, man. I mean, you're not trying to grind these micro edges with me and Ryan Heath. Completely ridiculous. But we might be able to get a solid guest, even if it's not Neil Orfield, who continuously rejects me, for next week's edition of the Underdog Drafter Party. Much like Ryan, you guys can find all my stuff over at FantasyPoints.com. I will also be working on the playoff slate breakdown next week, and definitely check out if you have any interest in playoff best ball. I mean, I can't imagine a better show than hearing Ryan and Jacob Sanderson chop it up on some of the playoff best ball edges, which, like I said, according to all the good gamblers I know, are absolutely massive. So definitely give that a look Monday and Thursday. Ryan, is there a time for those shows?
Yes, 9 p.m. Eastern time for
right.
Monday. And I think the same for Thursday, but yeah, that one might be to be determined. But yeah, 9
right.
o'clock Monday. I'll see you guys here.
Hell yeah. 9 p.m. Monday if you guys want some playoff best ball angles. But yeah, thank you so much, guys, for a great season. Really appreciate all the chat interaction we've had all year. We will be back next week. And for Ryan, for myself, and for producer Tom behind the glass, we hope to see all of you at the top of the leaderboards. What?
Why are you shaking your head?
You're welcome.